Hello, I'm going to talk now about Japan and how the residents of Tokyo are preparing for a potentially major earthquake, which many people say will occur in the reasonably near future in Tokyo. So if you're ready, I'm going to start. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. For decades now, the residents of the Japanese capital, Tokyo, have been waiting for what they refer to as the big one. And by that they mean a major earthquake with its epicenter in or around Tokyo. On the 11th of March last year, many people in Tokyo thought that the big one had finally arrived. Because, as we know, on that morning, a huge tremor set buildings in the capital swaying wildly. But we also now know, of course, that that was not the big one, because although the earthquake in Japan in March last year was extremely big, in fact it was the biggest ever in Japan's recorded history. I believe it was measured at 9, a magnitude of 9 on the Richter scale. So although it was very big, still the epicenter of that quake was not in Tokyo, but several hundred kilometers further northeast in the seas off the coast of Japan. Tokyo itself was left relatively unharmed by the earthquake last year. But the size of that earthquake and the devastation that it caused in the north of Japan was a kind of a reminder to Tokyo that it needs to be ready for a similar disaster, because all the experts agree that there will be a big quake in or around Tokyo sometime soon. And if Tokyo is not properly prepared, then the human costs and the economic costs of such a quake could far exceed what happened last March in the northeast of Japan. It's now estimated that over 20,000 people died in last year's Japanese earthquake, and over 250,000 people were left sheltering in refuge shelters. But of course, Tokyo is much more densely populated than the northeast of Japan. The population of Greater Tokyo is about 35 million people. That's a quarter of the total Japanese population. So if a quake hit with its epicenter in or around the Japanese capital, it could be truly devastating. A couple of years ago, the Japanese government commissioned a study which concluded that if an earthquake were to hit Tokyo, even of a magnitude of, I say, only 7.5 on the Richter scale, that's much smaller than the quake last year. Still, such a quake could cause tremendous damage in Tokyo. Tens of thousands of deaths and perhaps up to 1 million buildings would be destroyed. As for the economic costs, well, the same study said that that kind of earthquake in or around Tokyo could cause 112 trillion Japanese yen in damage. That's 8 times greater than the economic cost of last year's earthquake. And as I say, the experts all agree that there will be a quake relatively soon in Tokyo. The Earthquake Research Institute in Japan says that the probability of a serious earthquake in Tokyo within the next 30 years is over 70%, over 70%. So the question we have to ask is Tokyo ready? Well, the answer is perhaps, but perhaps not quite ready. Last year, the shockwaves from the earthquake in March brought transport networks in Tokyo to a halt. There were huge traffic jams clogging up the streets. Emergency vehicles couldn't get through, and many people ended up camping out overnight in their offices or walking through the night to get home. And then there's a question of building safety. Building standards have been tightened in Tokyo over recent decades. All new buildings are now, to a large extent, earthquake-proof. But not all the buildings in Tokyo are new buildings. In particular, not all the public buildings are new buildings. In particular, not all the schools are new buildings. There are over 10% of primary and middle schools which have still not been quake-proofed. Now, the Japanese authorities say that all that work will be completed by the end of this year. So I suppose the residents of Tokyo can only hope and pray that the big one does not arrive before then. Thank you.